Welcome back to another episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. I am your host, Graham Hall, joined once again by my co-host, Zach Goodall. And fall camp is well underway here in Gainesville. We finally have a nice little intra-squad competition that we can talk about, break down. That was Florida's first scrimmage of fall camp, held Saturday at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, also known as the Swamp. Unfortunately for the media, we were not able to view this one, but if you followed us over at swamp247.com, we got a whole bunch of intel and insider information for you to read. So if you want more information on what we are going to discuss in this episode of the podcast, I suggest you head on over to Swamp247 and read what we have compiled. It's a lot of really, really good stuff. But we're going to break down some of the important tidbits here today. Let's get it out of the way right away. DJ Lagway has not been a full participant in Gainesville. I think if you're following the team, you understand that this is a guy that they're going to be extremely, extremely careful with, and for good reason. You look at the insane hype that he is dealing with heading into his sophomore season. A lot of people talking about him as a potential Heisman candidate. A lot of people talking about him as being the savior of Billy Napier's tenure in Gainesville. And while those are very big picture right now, the big thing that we're following is what he is doing on a daily basis. And as it came down to on Saturday, he only participated in the initial 7v7 portion of the scrimmage, did not take live reps during 11v11, which I think some people out there are going to get a little bit more and more concerned regarding him. I don't think it's a big deal because, as Billy Napier noted, we just met with head coach Billy Napier earlier today. We're recording this here Monday afternoon, about a couple hours after we talked to Napier. He remains on schedule, and there's no concern that he is going to miss game time, which is the good news. But Napier has also noted that in a perfect world, you would like this quarterback to get as much practice participation as possible. He's still a young guy. There are still things to improve upon. He can build a rapport better with his wide receivers, get down timing, and do a better job moving forward at reading defenses. But he's been limited in that regard. Zach, we've been following the backup quarterback battle here in Gainesville for a little bit. And I know a lot of people don't want to think about the backup quarterback. That's a situation that you never really think about the backup until an undesirable injury hits. And then you're forced to turn around and be like, all right, well, who are we counting on now? For a while over at Swamp247, we have talked about it being a two-man race between Aiden Warner and Harrison Bailey. But if you followed our intel over at Swamp247 from Saturday, you read our stories on Sunday, and you saw Billy Napier's comments on Monday, it sounds like freshman quarterback Trel Jones Jr. has firmly got himself into the mix for that backup role. I got to get your thoughts on Trel Jones, what you've heard out about him, and just how impressive it is for him that for the second straight year, the Gators have a promising freshman quarterback that they feel good about, despite the need for further development, that this could be someone that could see the field potentially, but at least right now is taking first-team reps with Florida's offense at times.
Yeah, I'll start with a couple of preemptive notes, I'd say. I think what Billy Napier is mentioning about DJ Lagway and being extra precautious with him, wanting to, get more reps out of him in an ideal world, as he mentioned today, it sounds like a lot like what we've said in these couple of podcasts we've done so far, is that you want to see your sophomore starting quarterback get practice reps. And up until this point in the offseason, he's still yet to do 11 on 11, for example. We heard in the scrimmage, he did really everything up until that point where he would have to be tested a bit more mobily. They want to keep him away from the pass rush. And to your point, rightfully so. And as a result, I don't think any fan wants to worry about the backup quarterback battle. It's not something they really think about in a vacuum. But Florida fans have had every reason to this offseason for exactly what we're talking about, with Lagway being as limited as he's been from February, March on. And we've talked about it before too. Aiden Warner, he exited the spring seemingly with an edge in this battle. And I think if the season were to start today, and in that world, maybe DJ Lagway, they would risk it and put him out there. But because he's not done 11 on 11, I'm going to pretend as though he wouldn't. I still think it would probably be Aiden Warner, just based off the things that you and I have heard throughout the offseason. And obviously the coaches speaking as highly of him as they have. But you're right. They've inserted Trel Jones into this, and obviously they brought in Harrison Bailey as a transfer with significant playing experience throughout his college career to create this battle. And from what I heard in the scrimmage, it was a mix of Warner and Bailey largely going with the ones and twos. They would flip who they were working with from time to time. I'd heard that Trel Jones had gotten work with the second team. It was a bit of a surprise to me to hear from Billy today talking about him getting reps with the ones. I'm curious if that was in the scrimmage or even just in this morning's practice before we got to speak with him. But regardless, I think that's a very encouraging sign for Jones. You consider the season-ending lower body injury that he had, I believe, in like week 2, week 3 of his senior season of high school at Mandarin. He was able to come in the spring. Apparently, it wasn't the full workload they would put on an incoming freshman quarterback in the spring, just as they were continuing to get that injury into a good spot. But I mean, he practiced every day. He was able to take part in the spring game and throw a couple of passes. And it sounds like, from even when we've talked to a couple of players this fall as well, that he's done some impressive stuff, that he can make throws off platform, that he can roll out and create with his legs, that he's got a big arm. I mean, I remember, I think it was the first day of spring camp, an absolute dot that he put probably 40 to 50 yards down the field to Nashawn Montgomery. And apparently those kind of throws have kept up. So no one wants to think about this, right? Of course, you want to imagine or believe that DJ Lagway is not only going to be ready for week 1, but that they're never going to have to pull him unless they're winning to a point they want to get some guys some reps. But this is where we are, and they've got a couple of players that they appear confident in, at least to manage the offense. From the scrimmage the other day, it sounded like Warner and Bailey got the job done, weren't necessarily spectacular, but they were effective. I'm sure everyone has seen that highlight throw. Apparently, it was one of the 2 biggest offensive plays of the day, where Warner connected deep with freshman receiver Vernell Brown on about a 40-ish yard touchdown pass. And that's what you want to see at the end of the day. There weren't really many mistakes. From what I know, there was only 1 interception thrown from the start to the end of the scrimmage.
Yeah, Jones is kind of a fascinating situation to me because, well, let's be quite honest. I do think that Aiden Warner has made a lot of strides. I've talked about this a lot over at Swamp247. He looks much better than he looked in the 6 quarters that the Florida fans saw him in last year. And Harrison Bailey arrives. We all know the quarterback situation that Florida dealt with in the portal. They land one of the top freshmen last year in Deshaun Purdy. Purdy ends up asking for a release when he gets here. He ends up signing with Wake Forest, and the Gators are kind of left with what's still out there at quarterback. And one of those guys is Harrison Bailey, a veteran guy who gets here and has a lot of work to do when it comes to building relationships and learning the scheme and the system and, just everything that a transfer, not just at the quarterback position, but a transfer or even a freshman is tasked with digesting right when they get here. And so we've heard consistently that Warner has had that edge on him and that Bailey still has work to do. I don't want to say that Florida was necessarily disappointed with what Bailey had done, but they did feel like this guy didn't immediately overtake Aiden Warner like some people thought would happen. And then you get Trel Jones, a guy coming off an injury. But let's be quite honest, when it comes to a quarterback on the roster whose skill set is the closest to DJ Lagway, I mean, that's Trel Jones. He has the athleticism. He doesn't have as strong of an arm as DJ Lagway, but I mean, heck, how many quarterbacks out there could say that they can throw it like DJ Lagway can? I mean, it's just an unrealistic ask, especially for a first-year guy. But when it comes to being able to run the majority of your offensive playbook, if, God forbid, DJ Lagway misses any time this season, you could easily make an argument that Trel Jones is the most well-suited to do just that. So it is absolutely something worth tracking. Like we mentioned, the quarterback battle is not something you want to think about. Florida fans rightfully should feel that they enter the year with an entrenched starter, and there's obviously been some frustration that DJ has not been as healthy as many would hope, especially as healthy as DJ would hope he is. But now we have this conversation about the backup battle because you have to have contingency plans, and that's been something that Florida has evaluated daily. I asked Billy Napier today if there's been any separation at all whatsoever at the backup quarterback spot, and he pretty frankly said, no, it's going to be something we're going to evaluate on a daily basis. It's way too early to say that any one guy has the edge at the position, which leads me to my next point. There's a saying that, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. And maybe with a backup quarterback battle, that's a little bit unfair. But as a result of DJ Lagway being unavailable, along with a couple other guys who were key to the offense, such as Eugene Wilson III Dallas Wilson, a handful of other players as well, Aiden Mizell, Khalil Jackson. It was pretty clear coming out of the scrimmage that Florida's defense won the day, even though the defense was without several key players as well, such as Aaron Gates and Grayson Pup Howard, a pair of guys who started last year. Are you surprised any way whatsoever? And I kind of already know your answer. Are you surprised whatsoever to hear that Florida's defense won the day? And with that said, do you think that with all the attention given to DJ Lagway out there, I mean, let's be quite honest, he is the most well-known household name player on Florida's roster. Even though this team may have a pair of first-round draft picks on both sides of the line, potentially with Caleb Banks, Jake Slaughter, Austin Barber, DJ Lagway is the most well-known player on this roster. With that said, are you surprised that the defense won the day for the Gators, given the circumstances surrounding the current team with DJ Lagway being modified?
No, I'm not. To paraphrase what a source told me after the scrimmage, it's going to look different without two out there, right? That's just how it is. And even if in an ideal world, Trel Jones is able to come in and do a lot of the things DJ Lagway does relative to the type of offense they run, DJ Lagway is different. Everyone knows it. So no, I'm not surprised necessarily. Again, there were certainly some standouts there. I mentioned the interception earlier. It was by freshman safety Lagonza Hayward. If anyone saw the clip that Florida put out, it looked like that ball was thrown pretty much right towards him. So not ideal, obviously, when you're thinking about it from the quarterback perspective, but still very promising to see that from a freshman safety, one that Billy Napier has spoken a lot about because they need number twos at both deep safety spots to emerge at this point. They've got entrenched starters in Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton, but behind them, it very well could be Drake Stubbs and Lagonza Hayward. Maybe Michael Caraway, the converted corner transfer from Southern Miss, but they're trying to figure out who that might be. And Lagonza Hayward knew where he needed to be and ultimately made a big play on the ball. There were a couple other standouts as well. I was told that if you were to name a defensive MVP of the group, it would be Aaron Childs, the rising sophomore linebacker, a summer enrollee last offseason, still ended up getting, I want to say, 120 snaps on the season and flashed. This is now a pair of consecutive scrimmages, the closed scrimmage back in the spring, and then again this closed one in the fall, where he's had multiple sacks, let's call it, because they obviously don't let you take the quarterback to the ground in these situations, but they call the play. He's had 4, I guess, if you put these 2 games together. They're really inspired by his ability, not only as a stack backer, as an off-the-ball linebacker, but even to play the edge. And Florida obviously returns a pair of really strong starting edge rushers in Tyreek Sapp, George Gums. You look to Cameron James, LJ McCray when he's healthy, even Jaden Woods, the freshman. They've got a good room there. Yet Aaron Childs is someone they think that they could even move over into that role, or maybe as a Sam strong side linebacker, kind of like what Manny Nunnery did in this defense a couple of years ago. You can be really creative with this guy, and it's obviously showing in these team settings that he's able to go out there and be disruptive. He also had a forced fumble, and that was one of the plays that Florida put out. I mentioned Jaden Woods. I know this isn't really news because we heard this going back to the spring, but he's also continuing to get reps with the first team defense. And you know, he's a true freshman. There's technical development that any true freshman is going to have to undergo. But a source described his athleticism really as standout in that edge room. And that's not to discredit necessarily the edge rusher's athleticism as a whole, but we know Tyreek Sapp, more of a power defender. George Gums, I guess, fits that weak side a bit more, where there's a bit more spring in his step. Jaden Woods might be the next best guy when it comes to that natural explosion off the ball, the speed to arc around offensive tackles. Even going back to his high school film, like I thought he had a really impressive number of pass rush moves for an incoming high schooler from Kansas, especially, even though he was well coached there. You don't necessarily think that is a hotbed for developed talent, but it just looked natural to him. He looked like the type of edge rusher who could play immediately, and that is what we've heard really, I mean, this entire offseason. I heard there was good cornerback play. Devin Moore and Cormani McClain in particular, they may not have come up with interceptions, but I believe you heard, Graham, that Moore handled J. Michael Sturdivant, one of the most experienced receivers on this roster, if not the most experienced. Did a good job clouding him and keeping him contained. Cormani McClain had a couple of pass breakups as well. All in all, again, the circumstances are important when you don't have a DJ Lagway there, but the defense really came out and had its share of plays, was able to keep the offense in check a lot of the time. And that's good. That's inspiring. That's what you want to hear after the end of last season, where the defense really clicked and started to put it together. That so far in the team setting, they're at least they're picking up where they left off.
Yeah, a couple of those guys you mentioned, I think, are guys who are under the radar players, but by the end of the year, we're going to be talking about them and praising them profusely. I mean, Cormani McClain, it just feels like a matter of time before he lives up to that 5-star potential. He's faster, stronger. He's hitting 23 miles per hour. He's up to over 190 pounds. And with Dijon Johnson still working his way back there, it was expected to be a cornerback battle for that starting spot opposite Devin Moore throughout fall camp. But Johnson has been hindered by an injury, which has allowed Cormani to get additional reps along with guys like Ben Hanks and Onis, a couple other guys in there as well. Cormani had multiple pass breakups, I was told. And so he continues to trend in the right direction. And I get the sense, if I had to make a prediction today on August 11th, 19 days before the season opener, I would say that I would expect Cormani McClain to be out there for the first defensive snap. Aaron Childs is a fascinating one to me as well, because it just feels like Florida's going to have to find some way to get 3 linebackers involved in this defense. You have Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, Grayson Howard, Jaden Robinson. I think Billy Napier came out last week and said that we have 4 future NFL guys at linebacker. And, someone's going to end up being unhappy, whether it's one of the underclassmen or whether it's an upperclassman. I'm really intrigued to see what happens. You also have to prepare a guy to handle the in-helmet communication responsibilities, just given that Grayson Howard is still working his way back. And that means a large role if he is going to miss time for Jaden Robinson. I've heard good things about Jaden Robinson throughout fall camp. And then Jaden Woods, I can't remember the last time a defensive freshman player came up as much as him throughout fall camp. I guess I could go back to 2023 when we consistently heard that Jordan Castell was poised to start or play significant snaps from the jump as a true freshman. But it's hard for me to pinpoint a guy who, at a position that's difficult to get on the field, let alone start at as a first-year player, could be making this much of an impact from the jump. But everything we've heard about him, it seems to track and trend in that direction. George Gums was pretty clear. I wrote about this over at Swamp247, that when Jaden Woods got here in his first couple months on campus, he was shattering the weightlifting records, squat records, power clean records that were held by Gums and multiple other guys. I mean, to do that as a freshman is just, that's otherworldly in a sense here. So you get the sense that if he can handle everything else that comes with the season, the day in, day out, and the week in and week out, if he can handle that, it seems like he's poised for a large role. And we also heard about him having multiple quote unquote sacks in the scrimmage. Remember, quarterbacks aren't live and they don't want him to take any contact, but if it was counted as a sack, he would have had multiple of them. So seems like he's trending in the right direction here. So this has been a situation where you could see a lot of up-and-coming players within this Florida defense, around a lot of returning experienced guys such as Devin Moore and Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks. Zach, before we get out of here, though, we got to touch on the biggest news of the scrimmage. No significant injuries. We were talking about this on the board when we had our insider thread, and we noted, and you asked a really good question today, but this was the time last year when Jamari Lyons, who was poised for a large role, suffered a fractured ankle, and Tyler Miles came out and said, this guy could have hung it up. That's a tough recovery to come back from, especially when you made this much progress and at a position where you have to stay in shape or you're going to add bad weight. I mean, he could have hung it up, he could have not taken his recovery as seriously as he did, but now he's poised to be in that starting nose tackle role. Billy Napier was saying quite a funny story today about Jamari's first, year on campus, how he had a ton of bad weight and that first summer for him was just not good whatsoever. And then last year you saw a noticeable jump, and now ahead of this upcoming season, poised to play a starting role after he had that season-ending injury before the season even got here last year at this time in the first scrimmage of fall camp. So I know a lot of people out there see the insider news, the intel reports, and they're kind of all just waiting and holding their breath to make sure that there are no significant injuries. And that's the biggest thing that Billy Napier confirmed. Your typical bumps and bruises, but nothing significant. And knock on wood, for Florida, they're hoping that continues moving forward. as we get towards the end of fall camp and then get into game prep after next week for the Long Island game. Just coming out of it with no injuries in your mind, are you with me that that's the biggest news to take away? I mean, because there's only so much you can glean from a scrimmage, and you can hear about big plays, but you have the potential for a play to be significant, impacting the season from a negative perspective, and that's an injury. And to avoid all those, that's huge for Florida, because there's definitely going to be some teams that are on Florida's schedule who are not going to be as fortunate. And obviously for Florida, you got to hope that continues. But still having a clean bill of health when it comes to the scrimmage, how big is that in your mind? Are you with me that that's the biggest thing you came away from?
Yeah, sure thing. Shameless plug, I guess. If you were one of those holding your breath up until Billy Napier said it today, that was one of our biggest takeaways when we were plugging our notes on Saturday. So make sure, and if you don't already, go and subscribe to Swamp247. There's even a promo right now for 50% off an annual through August 27th. And you would have known that on Saturday. At a minimum, they came away with no significant injuries, unlike this time last year when Jamari Lyons went down. No carts taken out onto the field, no moment where everyone kind of gasped and was wondering if a player was all right. Like they came out healthy. And I think that not only is that encouraging in a vacuum, but it's encouraging when you consider all of the injuries that we have covered up until this point throughout, including DJ Lagway going back to spring, but the several seemingly more minor, shorter term injuries that have popped up in fall camp that have certainly given fans worry nonetheless. But it's extremely encouraging to go on Jamari Lyons. He was an 11-on-11 participant on Saturday, a year after going down in the same setting with a fractured ankle. To your point, what Tyler Miles said about a player that might choose to hang it up in those kind of situations. I mean, yeah, not only do you risk adding the bad weight back as a defensive lineman, but when you're 318 pounds, as Jamari Lyons is, and you're playing nose tackle or even 3 technique, maybe sliding out to the edge, it's one of those positions that you are using your ankle flexion more than really a lot of positions on the roster. And you pair that with the physicality of taking on blocks, how much that is going to do to your ankles. I can think back going to spring, like Jamari Lyons, you could see the ankle flexion was there. It's absurd, honestly. It's incredibly impressive. I believe the word that I used to ask the question even of Napier was, how inspiring is it to see a player like him be able to step back out there and do that? So yeah, for Jamari Lyons and all these other players too, really encouraging news to hear them come out without injuries in this scrimmage. And we know that there were a couple of holdouts as well, like Aaron Gates, right? He's been a full participant in practice, or largely a full participant, but they're still being careful with that ACL, with that knee being 8 to 8.5 months removed from him tearing it. So he did everything up until the 11-on-11 portion, right? Grayson Howard was someone that we saw return without a no contact jersey the other day in practice before the scrimmage. Same deal, held out of the 11-on-11 situation. Wide receivers, Eugene Wilson and Aiden Mizell are players that we've discussed, I believe going back to last podcast, how they were tending minor injuries. They're held out to, rather be safe than sorry. Kind of similar light as DJ Lagway, although maybe not near, definitely not as extreme. They're being cautious with the players that they know are going to be contributors this year. And I guess you would hope to hear that maybe some of these guys are available come the second scrimmage this upcoming Saturday. But one way or another, the ultimate biggest news to take away is that there were no new serious concerns that arose on Saturday.
Yeah, and as for Lyons too, I mean, it's not just the physical return, but like you mentioned, coming back mentally, same place you got injured. I mean, that's no easy feat whatsoever. I think we tend to overappreciate or underappreciate how tough that is for players. That is not an easy task whatsoever. So props to him. Absolutely. We hate covering injuries, writing about injuries. Unfortunately, it's a brutal physical game, and injuries are certainly impactful. They are a part of the game. Availability is ability, right? And I think that has been hammered home by DJ Lagway, by multiple key players on Florida's team. And so we'll continue to track those. And we'll also continue to monitor practice. This is, again, like I said, Monday, August 11th. We'll be out there tomorrow morning for a limited practice viewing window where we'll have a better chance to see who all is back out there for Florida, if some of these key guys are getting closer to returning, such as Eugene Wilson, Aiden Mizell, Pup Howard. So follow us over at swamp247.com for the best coverage of the Florida Gators. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Swamp 247 podcast. For Zach Goodall, I'm Graham Hall, and we'll see you next time.